Welcome one and all, I am Lex.
I'm Hazen Fields II.
And I'm Trey. How's it going today?
And this is Various Fields, another amazing special episode. And guys, I was thinking about something. And the one thing I was thinking about is sometimes I think things and someone else thinks something, and even though we're thinking about the same thing, we're not thinking about the same thing. You get what I'm thinking?
I think
so, Brain.
I think so.
But why would you mix blue and orange?
Exactly. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is called perspective. And well, the main reason why I want to have this topic, I will say there is a unconfirmed, I'm not sure, it's like a scientific rumor almost.
Rumor.
But I'll explain it. There's two things that kind of like always, I guess, prompt this idea in my head, and then we'll get into the actual topic. Sure. Mm-hmm. But one of those things is there is. So I'm not sure how everyone knows like how quote unquote scientifically our eyes work, right? But the idea is like anytime we see color or light, how we pick up light is that technically it's colors reflecting off of light is shining down on a color. Black technically how colors are shade, we'll get into that. And then it's reflecting off of it, and then our eyes are picking up that reflection of color, right? So that's how we perceive certain things, and then depth and all that jazz. That's how it works, right? But scientifically, there's no reason for our brains to be interpreting the same color as, like, if I see blue, my brain can be perceiving that blue as something different than how you perceive that blue. Because there's no reason for our brains to be having the same interpretation. We all see the same light waves, we all see the same thing, but there's no actual confirmation that the way my brain is translating it is the same way your brain is translating it. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And that bothers me. Because that just means if that's true, I'm not saying it's a thing, I'm not trying to hear to spread rumors, I just know that was one of the things that I've heard before. If that's true, that means I could jump into your mind and then I could see blues just completely differently. See what I mean? And that bothers me. Yeah.
That, interestingly enough, is beautiful to me.
It's cool, but like it's more like I'm saying it bothers me more in the thing of I wish, one, if it's true, but two, I wish I would know, because that means I'm just missing a whole perspective. Like Nels could have a different idea of what all the colors look like. I'm just missing everyone else's different, and I would very much like to see a new color.
Well, that's interesting because
that escalated quickly for me.
In terms of perspective, now that's a very cheerful thing, but perspective can be very dangerous. And because what happens is some people say perspective is reality. And so your perspective, some people hold on to their perspective so strongly, it not only becomes a perspective, it morphs into like a faith, and then perspective can go into a belief, and it can become into a core value. And so therefore people will stand on their perspective as though it's fact, and therefore you going against their perspective suggests to them that you're against them.
Wow. Is that your translation of that phrase, though? Because that phrase has always been... Because I believe that perspective is reality to a degree. Because you can't... That's how you translate things. So I always saw it as more as like a state of like just how things work, if that makes sense. Although I never thought about it in the way that... From your perspective.
Right. Well, I mean, to me, it's like if you read something, and, let's, I don't want to get controversial, but the idea, like people have different perspectives when they even read things like the Bible. And, of course, the Bible and the Quran and various books of faith, people hold to wholeheartedly.
Yes.
And sometimes it's perspective. And so, So what's your perspective, Trey?
Well, you guys are giving me a lot to work with. Regarding the cones and rods in everyone's individual eyes, fun fact on that, it degenerates as you get older, so we already understand that. So I didn't really consider the fact that you might be seeing a different blue than you are, right, naturally.
Yes,
right?
Naturally.
But over time, because they're also talking about the certain levels of dopamine in your system
as
well.
Yes, that's another thing dopamine affects color.
Right. So that will also determine whether or not, because you're wearing a blue hat. I agree, you're wearing a blue hat right now. Right. Lex agrees that you're wearing maybe a grayish hat. I don't know.
Right.
Whatever color he's seeing.
Well, we would still see the same color. It would just be
it would be a different intensity of blue, I'd imagine, right?
So to not get too off topic, the way this would work is like I could visually be perceiving something that to you would seem like a different color.
Okay.
If you're trying to, but it would still be blue to me because every time I pointed at blue and every time you pointed at blue, but in my head I could just be looking at something different. I don't want to get too much into this one because it gets kind of complicated, but a couple things that
The ball?
Microphone. Oh, yeah,
Oh, no, okay, I'm sorry.
But-
It's okay. Thank you so much.
But a couple things, another way to explain this is another thing that actually affects color and perspective is actually straight up vocabulary and also just the general understanding of societal understandings and other things. Blue, for a while, as a color, didn't exist back in the day because we actually didn't have a word for it for the longest time. It was like, if you look back to like old poetry or old descriptions of blue, or when they talk about the water, they would call it like, I think it was like deep wine color. That was our idea for blue. Yep, blue was in
A deep wine.
a deep wine for the longest time, and it wasn't until we got it wasn't until we had the vocabulary of blue, because also I think a lot of times it was like dye, and also people didn't read.
So what was the sky? A light wine?
I think so. Like there's actually just different ideas. I'm not sure if they even, because also the sky was also referred to as the heavens a lot, so sometimes we just regarded as something differently. But blue wasn't really a thing until we had like a blue dye, and that was also not super common. Then sometimes you got violet and purple, and that was also not super common. And then what was the other thing that we got? I'm so sorry, I'm losing it because there's another.
No, go ahead.
Well, pink. Pink is another thing. Pink was also just, because we also kind of see it now, was regarded just as a shade of red or just a different kind of red, but was always just called red. It was never called pink.
Really?
But pink is another thing back in the day we have. But now we can if you see something that's, if you look at the button right there, we call the recording button red, and all the way to the right, to my closer to me. That's pink, the color that's right there.
All
See,
right.
they would just call those both red. And that would shape your perspective of things. And as simple as color, and those are the building blocks of, I don't mean to get so...
No, that's fantastic. No, but I think that speaks to, once again, because you mentioned about, I'd love, in other words, if you were able to get into my head,
Yeah.
then you would be able to see my perspective. But
Yes.
not only, not just in colors,
yeah.
but if I can get in the head of certain people, and I, be honest with you, there's some people's head that I would not want to visit.
True.
Kind of. However, it might be advantageous for us to be able to see the perspective of another human being. That way we can possibly have more understanding. But it's so difficult because perspective is so strong for certain people. That's a big reason why we unfortunately in this world there is so much skepticism, cynicism, division, because people have perspectives and they are unwilling to see the other person's perspective.
Okay, I like that. I kind of wanted to jump off because you guys brought off two very interesting points on perspective, both in terms of arts and color.
Different perspectives of perspective.
Wow, perspecception.
That was impressive. You came up with the word.
That was a nice
Sorry.
word. Yeah,
That was good.
That was a
And
good
then
word.
Hard
for
to
you,
say.
you're doing more of the religious aspects of perspective. So my question was, in terms of, we don't have to go deep in this, but like I wanted to know, and do you consider the words of the Bible inerrant?
That's a very, very interesting question.
Because I know some people do.
Yeah, I would say that for me, now this is for everybody else, that I would like to think of myself as a critical reader, in reference to things.
Butterflies in the
So
sky.
well, as my, sometimes for me, my faith collides with my logic, and my logic sometimes collides with my faith, I guess. They're both colliding one, because there are some things that I know historically in reading and how things have translated. Certain things within the words that we read in the Bible are in error. And this is what I believe, and I hate, that in terms of how, certain words, things, because it's being translated, from the original Greek, Aramaic, and what have in Hebrew, and certain translations of words, they just did the best they could to change it into English words, and particularly in the King James Version. So there are certain things that may collide, but faith will sometimes make people see something different from their internals, even though their logical mind says, I know it is so it puts you at odds. So I'm not going to go deep in that because I don't want people to get mad at this thing. But if I'm speaking truthfully, or at least from my perspective,
Drinking it.
your faith in God can sometimes put you at odds with certain things that are in your core that you don't really,
Yeah.
hold to.
Right.
But because of faith, it's almost like peer pressure we talked about. But it's like if you go with your friends, do you believe in that? And you go, yeah, I believe it.
That's a very dangerous rabbit hole.
And I can, but what happens is that sometimes your faith, there's a famous scripture where one man in the Bible says to Christ, he says, I believe, but help my unbelief, suggesting that, he's got a great deal of understanding and belief, but, there are parts that he doesn't understand or believe, or have faith in, or has struggles with. And I think a great deal of people who read the Quran, the Bible, whatever you're reading, sometimes you become at odds, and you have to ponder, that kind of those things. So without going deep into that one.
No, I mean, there's by the nature of it just being religion in general, just in religion and faith in general, that can be the whole rest of the podcast.
Yes, indeed.
But I think religion and faith is a good start or subject to just talk about how important perspective can be, and also how dynamic perspective can be. Because just by the nature of there being different branches of Christianity, Christianity is another thing, totally based on perspective. Because why would you have different branches of Christianity if it wasn't for a different perspective on, Catholicism and then
one could argue that, and just as strongly there would be someone that will say, and this is one of those things, they say, no, they're really not different branches, they're all parts of the same thing. Now, even though obviously you could actually look at it, but there are those who are so sensitive to certain things, they will they would fight to show that there's a uniformity, even if there is not.
Right.
And perspective will have you do that, and that's it. Some people will, actually, fight against. I mean, if you will, this whole country, this whole world, everything that we do, is we've been culturally conditioned to.
Sorry, this gets me excited. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Culturally conditioned. I'm not.
No, keep going.
No, but we become culturally conditioned to believe, and our perspective. Like I give you, I always use this as an example. I know perspective and cultural condition is like neighbors, and but right now, if I was to sneeze, pretend I'm sneezing.
Bless you.
Tight.
Oh, sorry.
Right. No, but right. But we know that there is no connection between me sneezing and you saying bless you, other than the culture's demanding it. So, in fact, if I sneezed and you did not respond, a sensitive person would say, "Oh, wow, that's rude." There are people that feel like that because
is also kind of a jerk.
But I can cough all day, and then no one has I may say, "Excuse me," but if I sneeze, it's your requirement to respond to the sneeze. And
Up to 3 times. After 3, you're done.
well, that's a good point too.
That's also kind of there. We actually kind of did this a little bit with unwritten rules a bit.
Right.
But the reason why I got excited with what you consider cultural conditioning is I think that really also answers the one reason why I wanted to bring up the topic of perspective. Because there's also so much that I think, I like to oftentimes put this to, I think when I worked in news, this helped me a lot because it was like the business of asking questions and also the business of sometimes having interviews with and asking questions on things that, with people that you objectively disagreed with and you didn't know, but you had to listen to them. And there's a different way when you tell yourself to listen to someone objectively, and you that's part of your job. But the main reason why is that you have to look at everything critically. And then if you have that lens, you look at everything critically, and then you realize how much of I start to realize how much of myself is me and how much of myself is cultural conditioning. How much is this is how this is how you're supposed to be a man, versus that is the patriarchy, versus this is how you're supposed to cook an egg, versus but this is how I learned in America. You know what I mean? Right. And then those are not necessarily perspective, but those perspectives are put on you in certain things, and then I think that's why it's such. I think that's the reason why I start off with why it bothers me, because there is a thing another example I like to use of my idea of perspective, and this I think happens to everybody in different ways, but let's say you're driving down the highway, and then you're just doing your own shopping, groceries, whatever the case is, and then you happen to look to your left because you're about to merge lanes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you look and you happen to, sometimes you make eye contact with a random person in a car.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens when you're walking down the street, whatever. And sometimes that eye contact happens to just linger for a second or two longer than you mean it to.
Right.
Like someone, and it's always like, I think always a little weird. It's always a little weird, but like we both know, or whoever you're having eye contact with in that in that moment, they both kind of acknowledge like, okay, we both kind of stare at each other for a second, and you
Right.
kind of just keep going your own way,
Right.
and you don't think too much of it. But that one person is living a completely different life than you do.
Right,
So
right.
you can have a conversation with them, and they may, if they're different from a different country, may not even understand you. They may
Right.
look at things differently, and that bothers me because there's like so many just worlds in my
Right.
brain
Yeah.
that I just
No, but you're
can't
right.
experience.
But but those are things that are real. I mean, we have like I if you're getting ready to get into an elevator, somehow or another, being in an elevator puts you into a very small club. You know, there are rules. There are rules. Even for, like, in other words, if you're from the first floor to the 12th floor, 21st floor, the people that you are in that elevator with becomes your tribe. Even though you may have different, feelings, but it's momentary. So in other words, when you get in the elevator, you got your tribe, elevator tribe, because we've all waited patiently for the elevator.
Okay.
And one person puts out the phone and starts speaking loudly in the elevator. Now, for whatever reason, the tribe recognizes that's not what you do in the elevator. You're with us now. You don't speak loudly. You don't speak loudly because that's rude.
Right. Right.
You're supposed to be in the elevator ignoring us silently while looking up at the numbers increment and saying things like, what you gonna do? So there's elevated conversation.
That's good.
Yeah, things like
the only
that.
music that's allowed to be played is bossa nova.
Right, salt and tan and all the lovely
Yeah.
girl from Ipanema goes walking. But
That was refreshing, actually.
Yeah, no, bossa nova was great.
But
He sings a little.
but we create these rules because I'll tell you it's very interesting, and I've also people talk about time travel and stuff like that, and it's, man, I'd like to go to another world, and I say this, I promise you got to wait a few years and you'll go to a brand new world. Like, I'm now on Earth, but it's Earth 3 for me because it's different. Because when I was born in 1963, things that were considered polite, like
Right.
I'll give you an example. Like, we used to call things, oh my goodness, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're being noble and gallant as a man. There was the thing of being a man. Chivalry. Thank you, Nels. Chivalry at one point in time was considered nice. Now chivalry is kind of, it's almost looking like it's rude.
I think chivalry is still kind, but like I think the connotations and the things that have changed around it with like association of people who've used, like certain men who have used it or felt they were obligated after being chivalrous to get something in return, has
right.
then made it into a negative thing.
In which case, people would have used the coat of chivalry to proclaim their niceness.
Right.
Rather
like
than
a sheep and wolf's clothing kind of thing has made
Exactly.
chivalry harder.
Well, that's interesting because I think that it's even, I would agree that that's a part, but I think it's evolved even further than that. Because even holding a door,
Okay.
opening a door for a person, young lady or something like that, is met sometimes with those who say, like, I can do it myself.
Yeah.
Or you don't have to do that.
Or I have a boyfriend.
Or well, no.
I won't lie. That actually, I don't like doing this because there's a whole. We get into there's YouTube, there's Red Pill, there's a whole bunch of stuff that
Right.
doesn't matter. We'll get to that in a second. But that has happened to me once, and it was funny. It was just because it is unexpected, but I do get it to a degree.
Right.
But like, I won't go too much into this.
Right.
But I understand where you're coming from.
But what I really want to say is that it's interesting because I was born in '63. I was born for my father. Whatever you would consider me, because I guess you guys consider me a caveman. Whatever type of man you might. My father was an absolute caveman. He was like, he was just one step away from holding a club and eating raw meat.
Wow.
He was that kind of man. And there were things that were imparted into you. So now, what was considered to be values. Now it becomes a part of your core, and now it's you, and it's hard to separate.
Right.
So in other words, you'll do things. At least I will. I'll do things. Oh yeah, I'll get to it. Oh, I'll get that for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking about it.
Right.
Or I'll say, oh, I got that, or whatever it is that I'm doing, that can be looked at as like, no, you don't have to do that.
But there's also, this is actually funny. This actually happened to me recently, and there are also certain things with perspective and how to talk. And this is a little different. I'm bringing this more up because it was funny, because I think this was more reflexive than it was an actual thought process.
Stop right there. Please like, subscribe. This is Various Fields, and we want to give you a little cliffhanger of finding out what is Lexington going to say. He's about to say something else, but we can't find out unless you like, subscribe, and comment, and hit all the buttons. Back.
And the process was, like, we were on the train. I was on the subway with my partner, and without getting super into it, only because I want to keep all that type of stuff private, depending on what we do with my partner, it was the fact that although, like, this is a newer relationship for me, right? So we're in there for about a year, and this is also new for me, having someone I'm so in love with.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
absolutely.
She's
Yeah,
a wonderful young
absolutely,
lady,
absolutely.
too. Go ahead, go on.
But because of that, this was actually very funny. I had what was like essentially spider sense reflexes to a degree, because we're on the subway, and my partner is a grown woman, and they've been living their life, they're doing their own thing.
Right.
And every once in a while on the subway, you do like a little wobble, because like, the subway would stop her, like kind of, and my hand would be like,
Right.
and she's like, she looked at me fondly, but she's like, I'm fine, I got this. And I'm like, yeah, I know.
Right.
And then and she said it to me twice. And there was one time when she like, they said she kind of like moved again. I was like, huh? And then she looked at me like, kind of like, I'm okay. And I'm like, I'm not doing this on purpose. This is new for me too.
Right, yeah. Yeah, that's it. Now, what about yourself, sir?
Honestly, you guys are just bringing up so sincere points about your past. I'm like, I kind of wanted to keep this storyline going. I was enjoying this fondly. I'm doing story time.
The only reason why I'm saying, like I said, I was trying to keep only by the nature of this podcast. I talk a lot by the nature of I want to keep anyone who's not a part of this podcast willingly, all that kind of thing.
Right.
But otherwise, I do love my partner, and if I don't know, love your partners and brag about your partners in a way that is conducive to what your partner is okay with.
Well, but that makes but that makes perfect sense, because not a whole bunch of people have their partners on a podcast.
Right.
So now what was once private now becomes public information.
Yeah.
So we want to respect that as well. But I know the young lady, and she's a very nice young lady, and we're very happy to have her a part of our lives.
Yeah.
There you go. But in any case, yeah, I feel like I'm stepping all over you. Like
No, honestly, again, I'm just enwrapped in the stories that you guys were telling. I was actually enjoying this entire day. I was like, oh wow, this is great. I don't really have much else on perspective except for the fact of, like you said, everyone else lives individual lives, and oftentimes I like to listen to people as they try to explain their particular circumstances, so that way I can kind of add their perspectives to my understanding, right, in trying to handle my own situations. I kind of like that moment when you are sharing an awkward gaze with a person, like when you stare at an individual, whether it be through the glass of a windshield or whatever the case may be, right? As you're walking across the street, or if you just happen to connect on that 2.5 seconds right before it gets awkward on the third second, right? There's a moment of reflection of like, do I see this person, or do I see myself in this person? All right, I feel as if that's what kind of happens when you get lost in them, right? But it's not so much a like, oh, I expect to see myself driving this other car, but like, what are they going through?
Yeah, that's what there's always a moment where like I catch it, like we're walking by and like, and sometimes sometimes you just go by, but sometimes I'm like, oh, that person, like there are moments, and it's weird because I think sometimes, and this might just be good advice, sometimes when you're dealing with your life and you're dealing with your own perspective, you have to remind yourself that every person you're dealing with is a person.
Right.
And I know that sounds wild.
Every person is a story. You just have to take the time to read it.
Every person is not only a story, but every person is their main character. Every person is living their own. Every person is living their own life, and their life is just as important as yours. And it's not that I'm not saying like this is an advice for a narcissist, and I'm not saying, of course, people are people. That's obvious. But I think there's sometimes you can get so lost in your own. Check that. I'm so sorry. That's Rachel White.
You're good. We're good.
But there is like there is a moment where you have to remember that, like, I'm not just the main character. This person's living a life, and I think anytime you go around with that perspective, not only do you appreciate people more, not only do you see things differently, but I think there's just like it's just a general appreciation. Because, like I said, there is someone living a completely different life that both makes me happy and envious at the same time. Not envious for their life, but just like happy to know it's happening, envious to know that I can be on this planet for as many years and I can't get all the experiences possible. And it's like a subtle I wish, but not a true desire. Because I don't care about it, but as much as like I just recognize, oh wow, I have no idea what that person's doing.
Well, listen. That I think that talks of empathy, and I think that we need to be that as a society. We should be more empathetic, because that is one of those things that breaks us up. And in fact, we recognize this in small ways. I'll give you another small way. These are things that I like to find, those things where we connect.
Yeah.
Like if you're on a phone call with a person that you genuinely love and care about, but the phone conversation has run its length, and maybe they're still in a mode of wanting to talk, but it's really time for you to go for work or whatever you need to do. You know, it becomes like an unwritten rule to do the dive bomb voice so that you can almost end the conversation. So somewhere along your inflection kind of goes, you know, what are you talking about, something telling you? You go, all right. Or I say, yeah. You know, your voice doesn't, yeah, what are you gonna do? You know, something like that. There's a well. You're something like, yeah. You know, but because you're concerned for the person's feelings, you've got to make some type of sound that's the universal sound of was like this conversation. It's almost like being played out at the Oscars. Thank you for this conversation, and it's being in you know that kind of thing. But empathy and understanding and being concerned. How much time do we have there? We got 3 minutes. All right, let's get our last 3 minutes. Everybody hit something.
My last thing I want to say is I've now tried to take good and bad out of my vocabulary a lot more now because of perspective. I try to think of things that are healthy or unhealthy, things that work and things that don't work. But very rarely are things just good or bad, and very rarely are there things that are quote unquote just the right way to do something. There's always multiple ways. So with that in line of perspective, just try to have an open lens, and if you can, change your vocabulary to help you open up your perspective.
Go ahead.
For looming writers out there, it's also very important to make sure you listen to people because they might be the inspiration to your next character, whatever they may be. Understanding that you can write from what you know, this is true, but for you to have conflict in your life, the main conflict comes from a lack of understanding another person's perspective, I find. Or at least if you want to build a character's development, you have to understand where perspectives can align to have an individual party with your main protagonist, or whatever the case may be.
Different stories need to hear different stories.
Exactly that. So that's what I'm saying.
My last piece is remember to make sure that you know the difference between opinion and fact. It gets so difficult sometimes where people believe that their opinion is fact, and it's indeed just an opinion. So all this together, this is all out. This is our perspective. Take it with a grain of salt. Take what you want from it. Please comment, and we'd love to hear what you say. Because I promise you, just for this this YouTube site, your comments mean a lot to the algorithm, and I don't really know what I just said there. But
your comments also mean a lot to us.
Yes. Ooh. Yikes. That sounds,
on perspective, not the best thing to end on. We would love to hear your story. Please tell it to us below.
Indeed. Okay. Well, listen, this has been, fellas, as always, I love you. You guys are fantastic. And we love you for watching. Thank you for watching Various Fields, and we'll see you all next time.
Peace out.
Later.